building and running a hospital in South Sudan was significantly challenging, especially being very, very young and very, very naive. And I learned a lot of different things of why you can end up getting a gun pointed in your face and how to talk your way out of that. That one was just logistically challenging because, as we called it up there, we called it Kenya 2, or when you're headed back down to Nairobi, everyone would say, ukienda Kenya, uninunulia kitu moja mbili tatu. So there is always a big bias that talent from overseas is going to be better than local talent. Just because somebody is white means they're going to do a better job, and that is 1,000% not true.
Welcome to today's episode of Sicuro Conversations. My name is Andrew Musundi, and I'm the Managing Director of Sicuro Group Africa. Today I'm privileged to have my friend, and we've worked in the trenches with him before, Reid.
Yep.
Reid is a local community engagement expert and also investment and advisory expert within the region. And Reid, karibu sana kwa show.
Asante.
And also introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. My name's Reid Arensen, and like John said, we worked together over a decade ago in Turkana, trying to help figure out stakeholder engagement with local companies and foreign companies up doing oil and gas explorations. And for the last 10 years, I've been helping companies who come into Kenya from overseas and have all of their big ideas, and then wakifika Kenya, they all of a sudden realize things are a little bit different. So we help solve for the local challenges in the local context.
So let's start with what's local community engagement. You know, a majority of people just think that local community engagement is a desktop report that's given to them about a country, and then they come in with certain perceptions.
I mean, it's always a good starting point to have some research that's been done, but as soon as you get here, most of what you can find on Google and most of what you can find on the ground are very different. So what we do or had done in the past has been kind of go out and do community meetings with leaders, elders, people in the local areas where the work is wanting to be happening. And it all kind of depends on the context of the industry as well. In the oil and gas context, especially in the early survey stages, there is a lot of groundwork and ground cover that needs to be done over long areas. Other businesses where you are literally trying to figure out how to operate in the matatu industry, there all of a sudden is just meetings in tea rooms in CBD. So it's basically finding who's who and who matters in the industry that you're trying to work in.
Yeah. I remember when we were working for the oil and gas company down in Turkana, the dynamics were different. At that time, we had different major players coming in, wanting to get the gold that was there.
Yep.
And we seemed to have carved a niche in what we did.
Yep.
And is that totally, entirely about how we engage the community and the things that we put in place?
I think the level of our success was about how we did it. It was a combined both top-down effort, which was the traditional way that foreign companies come in, they engage with at the higher government levels first. Oftentimes they think that as long as the governor or the minister of parliament has given their thumbs up, they're good to go. The way we did it was a lot of community meetings with the leaders on the ground and establishing both trust and respect with them. And I think that's where it ended up working for us, is that they knew that there was a level of communication that they could get through to whatever the company needs were, rather than just having to go petition any sort of government entities that had kind of ulterior motives for success, mostly political aspirations, and turning something where you are legitimately trying to find out what the concerns are into a rally for your political party.
Exactly. Because I remember a few times when we were having engagements with the community, you get the fact that there are different actors in the communities
Yep.
that come into play. And sometimes you get pressure from the top that these are the people you're supposed to engage
Yep.
with. But then after you do your community research, you identify different actors within the community who are key pillars of
Yep.
the community. And most of the time I see a failure where investors are coming into the country and they bypass that. They get in from a brief that this is who you should
Yep.
engage with. And then it becomes a failure in the project.
Yep. It comes down to looking at, there's two different levels. There's a level of power, which is usually politically assigned or governmentally assigned. And then there's a level of authority in the community. And those two are not necessarily the same people. A political assigned power is somebody that managed to have a lot of money on one day of the year or one day every 4 years gets people to make a decision for him. The men or the women that have authority in an area are the ones that people are going to on a regular basis, daily, monthly, for consultation on resolving problems, figuring out how things are going to happen in the community. And if those people end up being the same person, great. If they're not, you need to find out who they are and deal with them. And those are the ones that will then be able to kind of guide your projects a little bit more smoothly. Yeah.
Okay. I remember there's a time that we were doing several wells
Yep.
in the communities. And is it up to a point where you're understanding the basic needs of the community rather than just looking at it from the point of view that this community, sometimes we reach a point where we identify the need for the community instead of letting the community identify the need for us?
Yeah, we came in with a list of different types of projects that we were interested in, but in these community barazas, it was really driven by them. And the two main drivers for the local community in Turkana was water and employment. And so we basically sat with them, looked at what some of the local solutions could be for both employment through the duration of the seismic acquisition, as well as the drilling projects, as well as then longer term things that even if that did not end up turning into a long-term investment, that could remain behind and provide benefit for the community. So the water projects were kind of on the longer term, and then the employment projects on a short term. So looking at both short term and long term projects, and not just saying we're going to come in and we're going to give you, these are the three negotiating pieces that we have, but to kind of sit down, listen, and then make an evaluation as to whether it's good or whether it's not.
Yeah. And also what I was able to see was that when dealing with the community also acted as a source of information for the project, not only from a security standpoint, also from the standpoint, this is what we need the project to benefit us. So sometimes I feel a majority of the people who are coming in just think that we all looking at the gold that's in the ground, but they fail to see what will benefit the community.
Yeah, that is one of the challenges with extractive industries is where the priority lies and where kind of the secondary beneficiaries are. So being able to kind of identify both the primary beneficiary and secondary beneficiaries and balance those well does require a lot more planning, and then a lot of liaising on both sides. It's helping the community understand the amount of investment that is coming in, and then also helping the investors understand that in addition to what they thought they were going to have to do, there are other things that may end up seeming like a bigger upfront cost at first, but they pay out in long-term dividends. Both with things like stoppages, delays, misunderstandings, and then it can escalate all the way to full-on riots and protests and all the other things.
And since you've gone to different industries from oil and gas to EV, is there a difference in terms of how you engage with the community? Or
I mean, I was telling you earlier, the technical details are different, but the actual processes are very similar. When you're talking about everything from cell phone towers to wind turbines to, oil and gas, or even, setting up local manufacturing, it's that identifying the difference between power and authority, defining kind of who is the person that makes the decision, who's the person that enforces the decision, and then who's the person that kind of carries out the day-to-day side of the operations. And if you can kind of figure those levels out along the way, it does make for an easier and longer term kind of success of a project.
Okay. I usually find it interesting that at board level, people usually see local community engagement as an afterthought instead of a key part of the process. Then when it comes to engaging people or experts in that particular field, it takes a long time and there's no budget allocation for that particular engagement.
It is. They're very happy to pay a geologist to tell them where to find it, but they're not willing to pay an engagement or a community engagement consultant of how to get there. And I think a flipping of that mentality would be beneficial for a lot of different industries on that side, or thinking that somebody can kind of do both, but it's a different level of expertise.
Yeah. And what's the correlation between local community engagement and security?
That's the same thing. Like if you don't have local community engaged in what you're doing, you're going to be paying a lot of extra money for extra security that's not going to be secure. Whereas if you can kind of not co-opt them, but if you can kind of incorporate them into the day-to-day operations of what you're doing, they have a vested interest in keeping the entire operation safe because they've got their own people, their own kids who are working on these projects. They've got their jobs and some at least short-term and sometimes long-term livelihood tied to the durability and security of the project.
And looking at the region, we have Kenya, we have Ethiopia, we have Tanzania. All these are countries that are coming up. Where would you say, and considering where you've worked, which has been the challenging area that you've worked in, and what are the different experiences?
I've worked in a war zone. So we worked in South Sudan during what is now the War for Independence. That had a very challenging set of work relationships because we were working in a civil war with no existing government. And so we were dealing with both a civil authority that was put in place by a military, like a rebel military. So kind of negotiating between the two of those to make sure that a medical project was kind of up and running was where we really kind of cut our teeth at the beginning, and learning the balance between talking to a commander and talking to a government administrator, and kind of making sure that those two people were aligned with what we were doing as a charitable organization, building and running a hospital in South Sudan. Was significantly challenging, especially being very, very young and very, very naive. And I learned a lot of different things of why you can end up getting a gun pointed in your face, and how to talk your way out of that, and how to really kind of leverage relationships to make things better and move forward, even when money or other material capacity is not there. Then we moved from there into northern Kenya. I was working up on the Ethiopia border, helping nationalize a windmill project that had been run by some charitable organizations for many, many years. That one was just logistically challenging because, as we called it up there, we called it Kenya 2, or when you're headed back down to Nairobi, everyone would say, ukienda Kenya, uninunulia kitu moja mbili tatu. So they did not even think of themselves as Kenyan. The disconnect between what they thought of was Kenya was basically where the tarmac ended at Archer's Post. And this was back a little over 15 years ago. That was just logistically challenging because to get anything up there was a 2 to 3 day journey. If you forget anything, if you break anything, if you communications, cell phones just came into existence, or cell phone towers came into existence while we were up there. And there was a single tree in our town where you could hang your little Nokia 3310 in the branches, and signal would drift across from the neighboring town and you would be able to get SMS messages. Then we moved to Tanzania. Again, it was much more logistically difficult to get there. It was on the North Island of Zanzibar called Pemba. And the biggest challenge with that was market development. The market was very small. The economy was very small. And the labor force was not very sophisticated. And the need to work was not very well developed. So in order to have 15 people working at a factory, I had 15 people working to get 8 showing up at any given day. And it was never the same 8 back to back. And so productivity, being able to kind of hit deadlines and meet some of the production expectations was very, very challenging. And then from an environmental perspective, being able to cure the lumber, it was a hotel and furniture construction business, so to have high quality standards and then have inputs that were just not quite up to standard was very challenging. And then we moved back to Kenya in 2015 and have kind of been helping in different industries. I really love Kenya because Kenyans have and I was born and raised here, but we have a very good way of if I don't know, I'm just gonna figure it out. And that is kind of the coolest part about working in Kenya and working with Kenyan companies, Kenyan startups, is that if there isn't an established way, we will figure out a way that kind of uses our skill sets, uses what Kenya has to offer to kind of really bring out some very high value products and high value deliverables.
And with the interest in Kenya, especially with investors in the fintech space, EV space, do you think that Kenya, it's because of the human capital that we currently have, and also the difference in terms of cultural change because of the new information age where access to information is easily available?
I think one very cool thing that happened in Kenya that may not have happened as much in other areas in East Africa is the establishment of education as a priority. Schools were built very, very early on in the development of Kenya, both during the colonial era and then post-colonial era. And there are a lot of very good local educational institutions from the primary all the way up to the post graduate level. And so you get very, very well educated Kenyans. And not to say you don't get a well educated workforce in other parts of East Africa, but that being taught then in English, plus the early adoption of the internet. I think there is stats about Kenyans on the internet, Kenyans on Twitter, or Kenyans on social media. You really don't want to cross them on a number of different frames. But that is, I think, one of the little superpowers that Kenya does have, is that ability to kind of be at the forefront of adopting technology, of adopting new waves of things, of being a testing ground of, something as simple as M-Pesa, which we did roll it out here and we use it more than anybody else. And that innovation of kind of mobile money was a decade ahead of anybody else. We did have it in Tanzania at the time. It was good. It was being used, but the funny thing is the number of agents were very small. But the level of trust was also very high. So if I needed to do mobile money, I could actually withdraw money from my mobile money wallet in a town 45 kilometers away. He would give the guy 2 million shillings, Tanzania shillings cash. So not a ton of money, but a decent amount. Hand it to a daladala driver, and he would then drive it to my house. So that was my first experience with mobile money. Very early time, when similar to when M-Pesa was kind of coming up in the early 2009, 2010 era. Now you can run an entire business on M-Pesa and on mobile money here in Kenya and not even have to run a regular bank account. That's how sophisticated and developed it is here for things like that. So it makes a really fun place to kind of come, innovate, test new ideas, despite some of the challenges that we have with government accountability and government efficiency. The Kenyan spirit is very, very fun, and I put that down to kind of the very robust education level that is across the country. It doesn't matter if you're coming from Mombasa or even in northern Kenya, in Turkana. We were finding kids that had studied at the local school in Logachogio that were very well educated. Like they had a good worldview. They were able to kind of interact with members from Spain and Portugal and Italy and other members of the team, and really reason well and advocate on behalf of their community. And that's not something you see kind of in some of the other areas where that level of education really does kind of play at the forefront.
Yeah, because as you've said, I remember there's a time that we had a baraza.
Yep.
And during the baraza, you'd get one of the chiefs standing up, or even one of the elders, and they would say, obviously somebody was translating for them, and they would tell us that, I would like my child to be as educated as you.
Yep.
So that the child can also advocate on our behalf. Because they felt that, as you say, there was a disconnect between Kenya in Nairobi and Kenya in Turkana.
Yep.
And is that, based on your experience, is it similar across the region, or is that specific to Kenya itself?
I saw it a little bit in South Sudan. I will say it was very much a different mindset in the North Island of Zanzibar. Other parts of Tanzania, education is recommended, but not nearly as highly prized or valued in the same way. And again, this has been 10, 15 years now. Things have definitely progressed quite a bit in Tanzania in the meantime. But my experience is that Kenya is just still so much further ahead because that has been a longer legacy there. And that's not to say that there isn't well-educated Zanzibaris or Tanzanians or Sudanese. I think South Sudan has the highest per capita percentage of doctors. They just don't work in South Sudan. They all work elsewhere.
Yeah.
NGOs or North Sudan or in the US and other places. So
yeah. And I'm looking at it from a standpoint where companies like our company usually come in from an advisory level to just tell investors who are coming in, this is what you should look out for. Or what would you say is the importance of integrating and also having local advice before setting up or spending a huge amount of money in country?
I think it's huge. It'll save you millions of dollars on the back end. To spend that extra little bit of time, both and meeting outside of the big posh neighborhoods of Nairobi or Kampala or Dar es Salaam, but going out into where your product will actually be used or where your factory will actually be set up, and really understand the community in which you are going to engage. If you're doing a big project. If you're doing a small project, it doesn't matter where you set up. You need to be very well tied in with the community. You know, I run a very small vehicle restoration business in Naivasha. We give internships to local Naivasha students in the area. We have 15 full-time employees, but we're always cycling through interns from there. And a lot of the opportunities come from vendors or suppliers that I do personally know. So the man that sells me spare parts, his son is finishing up at Kikuyu Polytechnic and he needs an internship. He's asked a bunch of different places and they're like, well, we can offer it, but we can't really supervise it. And so to be kind of tied in at that level of where your suppliers, your vendors, the people that you interact with on a regular basis see your value, not just as a customer, but as an investment into their family and their next generation of kind of income and input is really something that people really don't take into context. So the knock-on effect that an investment or a business has in that local community is enormous. And it's not just about having guards at the gate, it's having guards in the house next door, which are people that really advocate for you, say, no, these guys are good. They pay our people well. If you have, you know, needs for school fees, if there's scholarships that need to be had, they may not be giving them out to everybody, but they are at least willing to kind of consider and listen. And so a community, a good reputation in the community, a good standing in the community is your best form of security, hands down.
Okay.
And spending that time to really find out who that community is and build that community long beyond when you finish, like either building your cell phone tower, digging your exploratory well, or setting up your factory. Like it goes beyond just the initial setup phases, but it goes through the entire life cycle of the project.
Okay. And I know you've interacted with several investors from a boardroom perspective. What are some of the social biasness without naming names that you've come across?
A big one comes down to access to talent.
Yeah.
There is always a big bias that talent from overseas is going to be better than local talent. And I will tell you, 99% of the time, that is false. Kenya, and it comes back to that very high level of education that Kenya does have and the sophistication of the different markets and different experiences that Kenyans have bringing to things. So I know a lot of international schools in this country think that if they hire a Kenyan teacher, they are not going to get the same kiwango of teaching. And there is a lot of Kenyans every year going to university in Europe, going to university in the US. And what they want to do, they want to come back and they want to have the reason they're going for an education is to get a better job and come back and live a better life. And honestly, like, there is a lot of very high talent in the tech industry. There's a lot of high talent in the corporate management industry. There is a lot of high-end talent in the security industry. And so that, I think, is a big one, that you need to hire somebody from overseas or somebody that does, to come and kind of manage and do a better job. You need to bring somebody in from India. You need to bring somebody in from Portugal to kind of manage a factory. And there are very, very, very good, very highly skilled local available and great institutions doing the build up for it too. So if you know what institutions guys have been through, some are better than others. And it's just like the pedigrees in Europe and the US, where it's like, if somebody has gone to X university or Y university, the chances that their education and their exposure to kind of work culture and other things is going to be higher rather than if they've gone to a different university. So really kind of understanding that local context and how you can kind of identify talent in that way. I think it brings huge dividends because there's so much that somebody coming in from overseas cannot really know or understand. They're like, well, in Turkey, we do it this way. And it's like, great, that's very valuable expertise. Now, how do we translate that for the local context? Instead of a Kenyan that's gone and he's been working in Turkey for 5 years and he wants to come back, or he is back, and being able to leverage that kind of talent, like there are very, very smart, capable Kenyan talent to be plugged into organizations here. And some of them look like me, some of them look like you, some of them look like, so that's another bias, is that just because somebody is white means they're going to do a better job. And that is 1,000% not true. And even if they have grown up here and done other things. So really looking at kind of the background and the expertise as well.
Yeah. And seeing as Africa is becoming the next frontier,
Yep.
because we are pioneering a lot of things and there's a lot of interest here. What would be one word you give to an investor looking at investing here in Africa?
I would say we're going to be the next big market, both from a manufacturing and a demand perspective. Like we're the next big labor force, and we are our own next big market.
Yeah.
So figuring out what the needs are for Kenya, whether it's housing, whether it's transport, whether it's clothing, whether it's education, but we need to figure out how Africa can sell to Africa rather than Africa looking east or looking north to be our solution, but how we can be looking to the border right across the way and say, how can we be selling to Tanzania? How can we be buying from Uganda? How can we be trading with Ethiopia? How can we be looking at Ghana? How can we be looking at Morocco? And really looking at, because basically a lot of the raw materials are here. Why are we sending them elsewhere for them than for people to send back to us? Population growth is still on the uptick on this continent and probably will be for the next 40 or 50 years, if not more. Whereas other markets or other regions in the world are starting to kind of dwindle, and they are saturating their market. So the innovations that you have to have in North America are, how do I make sure I can make an Amazon order in my car on the way home?
Yeah.
That's not innovation. That's just excess. Whereas here it's like, how can we get the next 50 million cars on the road locally built, locally supported, locally driven, and locally engineered, like all of that. Kenyan cars for Africa, African cars for Africa. How can we, so our innovations are, how do we burst open new markets rather than how do we fine tweak a market of excess and get, the jacket that can just hold out a little bit more water, or the food that can make you just a little bit more faster in your afternoon run. It's innovation, but it's not in the same way. What we have here is a wide open, they call it blue ocean, they call it frontier, whatever you want to call it. It is wide open for growth. So I think if it's summed down to one word, it's growth. This is where growth is truly going to happen, and you just have to figure out what industry you want to be in to make it grow.
Okay. Thank you, Reid, for coming. And I truly appreciate that you have taken your time to come over.
Anytime.
Yeah.
And next time you come to Naivasha, and we'll show you what we do out there.
Okay.
Yeah. Asante.